Welcome to the next lesson in our Statistics for Trading course. This lesson is on our tagging reports. What are our tagging reports? Well, there are destinations that some traders like to trade towards that are consistently hit. And we provide the statistics of how often this happens and when it happens. Now, the reports that we provide are our IBP report, which is an initial balance period, and our IBP 1.5, which is 150% of the initial balance period, and our overnight range report. Now, just a reminder that all these reports are in Eastern Standard Time. Now, what is ONR and what is IBP? Well, IBP is the initial balance period, which for us, now some people may define their own initial balance period that they like to trade toward, but for us, it is the first hour of regular trading time. So our RTH, our regular trading hours session, it's the first hour of that. What about ONR, which is overnight range? Now for us, the way we define overnight range is from the Globex open until the RTH open. Now some use perhaps like in crude oil, some use perhaps the overnight range as to after the pit session closes to the next open. So that would be for Eastern time, that would be after 2:30 until 9 a.m. the following morning. But for us, we use the Globex range, which is the 6 p.m. Eastern time when the market opens until the regular trading hours session opens at 9 a.m. So our statistical reports tell us how frequently and what the percentage of time that these destinations are tagged. And we're going to go through the reports and explain what they are briefly. So let's get started. Here's a small portion of our overnight range report. Now, if you look in the header, you see our session times, our regular trading hours for crude oil. This is Eastern time again, 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And we refer to RTH period 1 as 9 to 9:30 a.m. So you see here below, you see our report for the last 7 days and the last 15 days. The next page will show a full screen. We picked an old report here to take a look at. So let's take a look at our RTH period distribution box. So period 1 would be the first half hour. As we do here at statsfortrading.com, all our periods are broken into 30-minute periods. So period 1 would be 9 to 9:30. Period 11 there would be 2 to 2:30. So we divide the what some would call the pit session into 30-minute periods. Now for the last 7 days, this is as of 12/31/2019, it tagged the overnight range 100% of the time. And it did that in the first 30 minutes of trading. For the last 15 days, it did it 100% of the time, and it did it 80% of the time in the first period, 10% of the time in the second period, and then 10% of the time in the fifth period. So let's take a look at a full page of this. So we break this down from 7 days, 15, 30, 60, 90, 180, and 365, a full year. So if you look at the full year, we see that 92.9% of the time in 2019, the overnight range was tagged. This is a common occurrence in crude oil. So we say that only 7.1% of the time in the past year it did not get tagged. And you could see under the period RTH period distribution when that most likely happens. You see that in certain times of the day, it almost never hits it. Like for 60 days, it never even hit it during period 6 and 7. So the lunchtime, time, oftentimes you don't see a lot of action in certain markets. So this is an extremely useful report. Now, just like the following report that we're going to consider the IBP reports, is just think about while you're trading that if your 30-minute range report puts the overnight range within reach, you can look at your period and say, well, how often of the time in this period has it hit? Now, just think about this. Like, let's just say you're in the past 15 days, 80% of the time. Now, let's say it's the second period and it has not hit, right? So there's a really high chance it will hit, even though it says, if you look at our 15 days, we see in the second period, it's 10% of the time. So let's just say it's between 9:30 and 10 and you're trading and your 30-minute range is, say, 35 ticks and the overnight range is 30 ticks away. Now, some might look at this report and say, well, there's only a 10% chance that it's going to hit that. But that may be looking at this report incorrectly. See, if it didn't hit it in the first period, 80%, add those two together, and you could say that 90% of the time it's hit in the first two periods. So think about that for just a minute. So if it hasn't hit in the first period, you have a 10% chance in the second period. Really, from a certain perspective, you could say that at this point you have potentially a 90% chance of it hitting. So again, as you start trading and using these reports, you start thinking in a little bit of a different way. So that can be extremely useful. Now, I just have to point out, remember that a statistical historical probability is simply that. What's the root word of probability? Probable, right? It's not a guarantee. So if you have a 100% statistical history, all you could say really is that it probably will tag. Now, a 90% probability is pretty good. That's really good. A 50% is not so good. It's just basically flipping a coin. So keep those things in mind when you're looking at these, the period distribution. So a probability distribution, we show how often it has happened statistically in each period. Now that, again, just to emphasize, you're looking at period 5, it has a 0% chance, historically it's been 0% of the time. That doesn't mean it's never going to happen in period 5. It could happen today. It could happen the day that you're trading. But again, if you're thinking in probabilities, these decisions can be made based on the the statistical history. Some of these words are a mouthful, let me tell you. Here's our next tagging report, the initial balance period. Now, the initial balance period is the first 60 minutes of trading of the regular trading hour session. So here we see the NASDAQ. We see, well, the NASDAQ generally moves pretty good in the third period. It hits the in the first two periods, for instance, in the past 7 days of this report. This is a more recent report. We see it's been 80% of the time it's hit in the first, the second hour of trading. Remember, see how it starts in period 3. So period 1 and period 2 are the actual initial balance periods. So we started at 3, and you can see in the header that RTH period 3 is 10:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Again, we take the full RTH session, 9:30 to 4, and we divide it up into 30-minute periods. That's our probability distribution table there, the RTH period distribution. So IBP now, it's not that surprising that many markets hit IBP because they've already hit IBP, you might say, in the first hour, right? Because that's the definition. It's the high and the low of the first hour of trading. So it may, period 2 may end right near the initial balance period. So it would be a high probability that it would tag. So our next report, though, is the IBP 1.5 report. So now here we pick the Russell 2000 market. We see that IBP 1.5 is not tagged very often on the Russell. So again, 1.5 that's 150%. So you take the RTH period, the first hour, the high minus the low, you multiply that by 1.5, and then you add it to the low and you subtract it from the high. You have your 1.5 range. And this is the statistics for how often that will be tagged. Now, so you might say, well, during this period of time, I'm not going to trade for these ranges on the Russell because they're not hit very often at all. In the past 30 days of this report, it's 52% of the time. So that's basically random. You could flip a coin. So if you're not seeing higher numbers, be really careful about using those as trade destinations during the RTH period distributions. And we see there that if you look at the 7 days, those 40% of the time happen between the third and the fourth half hour. So that's the second hour of trading. The rest of the day, and if you look at the other reports, the rest of the day, it's not hit very often at all. So is that a market you want to be trading later in the day? Well, that's for you to decide, because trading towards destinations is not the only way to trade. But for those who like to, these reports help you to pick a market, perhaps that is has better ranges later on in the day, things like that. That's one of the reasons we have so many reports. You might wonder, well, why do we have so many reports? I only use one or two of them. For me, the consolidated report, which is we've not had a lesson on that yet. That's our next planned lesson, is probably my favorite report, along with the daily ranges report. But we have all these other reports because different traders like to trade differently, and they provide a little bit of research for those who may use some of these other reports. So you could do a deeper dive into a market by looking at some of our other reports. But for instance, the report that you might have with you while you're trading might be what our next lesson will have is the consolidated report. Of course, that's only a 30-day snapshot of basically everything except for our daily ranges. So that's going to be our next lesson. At least that's the next lesson plan. So stay tuned for that. So that concludes our tagging reports lesson. We hope you enjoyed it. As you can see, that as you start building on our 30-minute, adding them to our tagging reports, you can really be helped statistically in your trading. I personally believe that it can increase profitability. Of course, we know that just data does not make a good trader. There are other aspects of trading. But we believe that statistics can add confidence to a trader. And of course, when you have confidence can make you better really at anything that you do. So we hope you enjoyed this lesson. Thank you for watching. Remember, at statsfortrading.com, we believe that knowledge is power and that you should never take the trader out of the trade. Happy trading.